And hello, we are live. And is it okay if I call you Dr. Pat?
You can call me Dr. Pat or Pat
Okay, cool.
or
'Cause-
Pat. Pat's fine.
Yeah, 'cause I heard our mutual friend Brenda say Dr. Pat a bunch of times.
Yes, 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 she does. She does. She does.
Yes,
My sweetheart.
she really burned it into me that. And I got my as soon as I start, I got my gardener coming up to my window. But
Of
but
course.
we've decided that we're going to tell jazz piano stories. So I'm going to tell my Chick Corea story, and then you're going to follow up with your story.
Okay, okay.
So um, when I was in high school, my one of my high school teachers found out that I was a musician, and I was a serious musician. And he brought in this box of LPs, and he said, "Any of them you want, you can have for $1 each." So I grabbed a bunch of them. I didn't know, like, I don't think I knew any of these people. And there was an album called No Mystery, Return to Forever, Chick Corea's Return to Forever, with
Yes.
Stanley Clarke on bass, Al Di Meola on guitar, Lenny White is the drummer, and then Chick Corea playing piano.
Oh,
And I mean, that album blew my mind. And as a guitar player, it really introduced me into this Latin style of playing through Al Di Meola that really affected and infected my playing. So eventually, when I moved to Los Angeles, it must have been the late 80s, but I was playing rock and roll. And we had heard somehow that Chick Corea was doing a in-store appearance at Tower Records on Sunset.
the famous tower on Sunset.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I don't know if I had a car then. And I used to hitchhike and take the bus and all sorts of stuff. And so I got down to Tower Records, and like, I was early. I'm always early, and I sat up real close, kind of to the edge of the piano. But like, as time went by and more people showed up, there was maybe between 20 and it was like right in the lobby, not even lobby, like they had moved stuff, and the piano they had rented was sitting right as you walked in. And so like, people were kind of crowding me and stuff. And Chick came out and he sat down, and like, I couldn't quite see him, and people were all on my back. And at one point I said, you know what, forget it. And I just kind of rolled to my side and laid down underneath his piano. And then he started playing, and I could just see in his knees, and he was moving his like sustain pedal and stuff. But the piano, just the sound was just like coming right down on top of me. And I didn't get to see his face, but I got to have this experience of the vibration of the music. And I often wonder, because I was, at that time, I was a 20 something. I had long blonde hair down to my butt. I was wearing black leather and combat boots. And I
Yes.
wonder what he thought about this
Yes.
young man laying underneath his piano while he was playing. And it was so great.
I think the thought that came across my mind was a Chick Corea infusion, you know,
Yeah.
to be showered in chick magic. Um, man, I'm so happy for you got that. You know, yeah, and you've never been the same. I mean, to have that, to be showered in that energy, to be and how wonderful to follow your instinct, to say, you know, to not be distracted by the crowd's body up against yours, to just lie under the instrument, uh, and to the chick was really handsome, and I know when I'm watching a musician, someone as handsome as Chick, you're alternating between his face and his fingers on the keyboard, um, usually with pianists, I try to find a seat so that I can watch their hands on the keyboard. But for you to be able to watch his pedal work, um, man, what a beautiful experience to have to be showered. Uh,
Yeah.
do you remember what he was playing?
No, I don't.
Remember the tune?
No, because I love the No Mystery album. I love the My Spanish Heart album. I
Yeah,
love the Romantic Warrior album.
yeah,
But yeah, I don't remember. I remember looking at his legs a little bit, and I remember laying there just like letting it penetrate me,
yeah, yeah,
absorbing it. But
yeah,
yeah, I wouldn't be able to say what song it was.
yeah, yeah. And those experiences, it really doesn't matter which one.
What's what's that?
And, and those experiences, it really doesn't matter which what the tune was,
Right, right.
because it is the magic of the tune.
Yeah, yeah.
Want to wait until they go down to the next yard?
They're gonna pass by right now,
Yeah.
and yeah, and we should be good now. They
Okay.
came right up to my door.
I know. I did.
Yeah.
They sure did. Oh, that was quick.
What's that?
They just stopped.
Yeah, they came right up to my door and then they passed on by.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That didn't last long. But yeah, man, Chick Corea, I saw that classic concert with Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea at the Hollywood Bowl. Um,
Oh,
just magic. But to be able to see his fingers on a keyboard. Um, so I have a Herbie Hancock story for you.
I'm ready.
So I'm in grad school and I've approached my dissertation committee chairman and said that I was interested in putting together some research on altered states of consciousness and creativity. And I was in a really classic PhD program where um, you are you are going to wind up with a bunch of information that you're going to apply statistical models to, and you're going to come up with a conclusion, right, about what's happening. And so my chairman says to me, I have no idea how to develop a research methodology to help you examine your interest. And, I was like, oh, this is a drag. This isn't, I don't know anyone that, and you're going to have to put together a different committee to really get at what you want with this, because no one on the committee that you have knows how to do that type of research. So I'm kind of trying to figure it out. And so one day I'm in the hair salon, and the hair salon was on Pico Boulevard in Los Angeles. And those were the days when African American celebrities getting their hair done, there weren't shops to do our hair in Beverly Hills or Santa Monica. And so the musicians and artists from the hills and the West Side would come into LA to see their stylists who were in LA. And so I'm sitting in the salon, and Herbie Hancock is sitting in the chair directly across from me.
Oh wow.
And that's what I said too. And I said to myself, well, Pat, if you are really, and I'd been listening to his music, I knew his music, I had a sense of music, music that felt inspired. You know, when you hear musicians, you think, oh, that feels really heavily inspired. And so I thought, well, Pat, if you're really interested in altered states and creativity, here's your guy sitting right here. This is the moment. So I spent the time to figure out what one sentence I could write on the back of a business card that could really explain my interest and capture his attention, so that he'd know I'm not trying to get free concert tickets or, keyboards that he might have lying around, but to really encapsulate this idea. and to capture his imagination. So I handed it to his stylist, who was a great gatekeeper because he wasn't having any of it. He wasn't passing any notes. And so I managed to convince the stylist, and he gave it to Herbie Hancock. They disappeared for a while, came back, and the stylist handed my card back to me and said, "This is Mr. Hancock's personal number."
Oh,
Yes. And at the time, I was young enough and naive enough about Hollywood that I didn't realize that he didn't give me to a gatekeeper. He didn't give me to the publicist or the manager. He actually, that was the phone number he actually answered. So I called, he answered. We spoke for a moment. I reminded him who I was. He told me that a question that I was answering, that I was asking him, that he wanted to answer, he felt was important, that it was an important conversation that wasn't had enough, that he thought it had implications for our evolution in consciousness. However, he was on his way to the Grammys with Joni Mitchell. And it didn't feel like a loss. It was an absolute win for me because I needed that, as a grad student, to hear, your committee can't help you. We have no idea what you're talking about. We don't know how to conduct that type of research. If you want to do that, you're going to have to start from scratch, and we don't know how long that's going to take. It was discouraging. And so to have one of the masters say to me, "Yes, you're on the right track, and I'm here with you. I want to affirm the value of what you are doing, and let's call me back. Let's do it." I really, and it has set me on this path of curiosity about mystical experiences, and not just in the creative process, but mystical experiences generally. It's given me my life's work, or a piece of it, for decades.
wow.
Yeah.
That's
It showed the magic opened up in the hair salon.
that's beautiful. What decade was that?
Ooh, that was the 80s.
Okay.
80s.
So yeah, so Herbie would have done like that, maybe that rocket track about that.
Yeah.
Right, right.
He was somebody I'd listen, he was on everybody's playlist back then, you know, and not that he isn't still important, but you heard his music, you heard his compositions, um, and there were a few interviews in which what he had to say was so important. He was an intellectual in addition to everything else, and a truly deeply spiritual being. I didn't know at that time that he was a practicing Buddhist,
Right.
but he put all those pieces together. I was really, it was, yeah, the universe opened up for me that day.
That's beautiful. I remember watching a Miles Davis documentary, and Herbie saying, "Yeah, someone told me Miles was looking for me."
Yes, yes,
It's
yes,
like,
yes, yes,
but
yes.
it's like your story. And then he goes one day, like he called, he said, "This is Miles," and he's like, he's on the phone.
Right, that's right. One day, I mean, you know, his generosity. People like Herbie Hancock are pulled on all the time for something. So many people want something from them all the time. And it wasn't lost on me that he gave me direct access. Uh,
Yeah,
and that it was an important conversation that he wanted to have, and that he was trusting me to have that, because it's also an intimate conversation.
It is. Although I believe that artists are having intimate conversations with all of humanity on an ongoing
That's
basis.
right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I'm going to tell you, in the conversations that I've had with people about transcendent experiences, mystical experiences, spiritual experiences, that what I found, uh, and at first I thought, well, Pat, this must be about you. But it's not. What I found is that artists, whether they're visual or performance artists, whether they're writers, that it's much easier for them to talk about transcendent experiences than it is for people who aren't deeply attached to creativity. That there
Oh,
is an experience and a language that exists inside the creative community and within creative people that comes with being vulnerable and being open. Um, as I had a friend of mine say, he wakes up and composes and plays to have that experience, that is the sweetness of being creative. And I think people who haven't found access to that creative source within themselves have a more difficult time with that language and with that kind of intimacy, that there's a taboo that
yeah.
creative people have crossed over.
It's interesting how at me, I always have an assumption that everyone knows what I know and has experienced what I experienced.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah,
over time, you start to realize, oh, wait a second, that was unique. I have this, I've told this story a couple of times, but my mother used to come down and take pictures of my band making horrible noises as young teenage boys in her basement in Cleveland, Ohio, both my parents. And she would get the pictures back and she would say, your mouth is always hanging open. It looks terrible when I take that picture because you close your mouth. And, I didn't know that I even realized it at the time, but I would get into these states
yeah,
of like these trance states. And I
yeah,
would literally, this sounds weird, I would drool. And
yeah,
when I was playing, and like
yeah,
and I saw occasionally other musicians do
yeah,
that. Um, and then I went through different parts of my life. And when I got into yoga and meditation and used the tools of yoga and meditation to get to this place where everyone's trying to get to
yeah.
as yogis and meditators and Buddhists, I was like, oh shit, that's that place I was at already.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You found that place really early. I think for myself, I found it really early also. Um, and that is just such a gift to find it early and then rediscover it. That's what happened with me. I found it early, went to school, became socialized, and then found it again.
That's funny how that works because it was when I started to think about music like in different ways of like, I'm going to make this a profession or I'm going to take this into the world of, then all of a sudden that started to turn off a little bit.
Yeah, 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 it does. It does. It's yeah, man, there's nothing like being well socialized to 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 put our essence in a funky kind of place, to
Yeah.
it commodifies it. We have ideas about goals and ambitions and all the stuff that we have to figure out when we're young. um, and there's a way in which that can really interfere with what we're actually trying to do,
Yeah.
and we have to work our way back, hold on to the juice that comes with learning how to navigate, um, and discarding the rest of it and going back to that essential place and still knowing how to navigate, but getting back it's really getting back to ourselves, and creative people really get that what we're trying to do is get back to rediscover our most authentic selves and to get back to that place that we remember. We remember being there from when we were young, and our mothers take pictures of our mouths hanging open while we're in that place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you, well, I was thinking, is creativity an altered state? And
Mm.
then I thought the way you described it, it's not an altered state, but it seems like an altered state because we can be so detached from
Yeah.
our pure connected self. So the times that we get there, we're like, oh, this seems like an altered state. Although, do you think it should be a natural state?
Well, yeah, because that's the question, right? Is this the altered state where we are now?
Right?
And is that place home? Because when I'm in that place is home.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
body knows it's home. My nervous system knows, everything about me knows that that's home and that this is something else. But we do call that the altered state
Yeah.
because that's the nature of the language.
Right.
Um, but that's, for me, that's, I'm never more myself. I am never more my essential self
Right.
than when I'm there and home, when I'm home.
Yeah.
And they're brief moments, but the power of being at home. So yeah, the question that you're asking is the question, right? Because we call it altered, we do call it altered, but that's really home.
Yeah.
And this state is as real as it feels, is the altered state. This is the illusion. This is, we're living in this place that separateness creates, but that's home.
Right. And you said when you were talking about that, some about the language of it. And do you think, and I have a feeling that sometimes language can't do the justice. I mean, and to get there, you
Mm-mm.
know.
No, language is a problem. I mean,
Yeah.
the brain, the front lobes, our brains are wonderful at doing what they do best, right?
Yeah.
But language, um, cannot even begin to capture those experiences, can't begin to convey the experience in those moments. Um, those moments really are ineffable, which is why poetry and metaphor
Yeah.
are the best ways of communicating um, those experiences. Language is completely inadequate, and especially the language that we speak and that exists now, which is the language of commodity, the language of transaction. Um, it's the language that comes with colonialism and hierarchy. This language, and so it does not touch the ineffable.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't. Um, yeah.
So a lot of people ask me,
What
and
about you? What do you think? How does it, because I would imagine that as a musician, that's the language that you use that's best at this.
yeah, I'll tell you, and teaching yoga and playing music is very similar energy wise to me. Um, and I have to be aware
Hmm.
that what I'm experiencing isn't necessarily what the other participating members are experiencing.
Yes.
but sometimes I feel like it is. And
Mm.
I judge my performance, my providing of the class based on uh, my transcendental state during the
Yeah.
moment or performance or
Mhm.
class. So if I can get myself to that place in the room with the people,
Yes.
I feel like I've done my job, and it's at least if it's not in them, it's around them and accessible to them.
Yeah.
But I can never guarantee, you know, what they're actually
Hmm.
feeling. And so I judge it a lot based on
Yeah.
my feeling,
Yeah.
which changes. It's not, I can't always get there.
Yeah. Yeah. That raises a couple of really interesting things for me because I don't have a practice that allows me to um, attempt to get there. I'm a meditator, and I've always, whenever I've gotten there, it always feels accidental and an act of grace that I got there. I never experience it as my actually knowing or being sophisticated enough at the practice to be able to promote that for myself. Um, and so for me, not having a practice, it always feels like um, mystery just arrived. The moment arrived and graced me.
Right.
Um, I would love to have a practice. But I have a question because one of the things I'm really curious about with musicians, with performers, is in a band that's playing, you're playing with your group, and that thing happens where you lift up, off, and out. How often does it happen that the other band members know this is happening for you and can sustain you and support you as you have your experience and then return?
Okay. Um, it doesn't always happen with all musicians. And I have played with musicians where that doesn't happen. Um, and I've played in the context of a group where it happens between several people in the group and maybe not the other people.
Mhm.
And I don't know why I can say that, because the truth is, like I said, I don't know what the other people are experiencing. Um, but there are parameters as musicians and the techniques and the movements that we need to know in order to facilitate what we do with the drummer's rhythmic experience. And all of these things need to be learned in a second nature quality
Right, right.
so that we can move without thinking.
Mhm.
If we're in, to me, a lot of times it needs to be part of, it doesn't have to be, but it's more possible to facilitate that upward momentum in an improvisational situation
Yeah,
rather than a structured.
yeah.
I've seen it happen or felt it in some structure,
Mhm.
but it's more often going to happen when we stray from the structure.
Yeah,
And when you stray from the structure and you personally, either as a soloist or even as a rhythm player, the support and understanding and trust of the other musicians around you, which you really have to just throw yourself into. And, I trust regardless,
mm,
and then if the trust is questioned, there's moments where you're not going to get there and you'll know why.
yeah,
But you have to trust them and they have to trust you and themselves. And the support seems to, I played with this piano player once who was really good, grew up in a jazz family. And I was moving and I was in that state. And within that state, I was also able to witness that state as a double mind, which
Right,
doesn't,
right.
and I realized she was such a better musician than me, that she was able to move underneath me in ways that lifted me a little higher and supported me in ways that I don't know that I could have returned.
Oh,
But that kind of help and trust and knowledge
wow.
just really just yeah, the language is failing me a little bit.
Yeah, no, I got you. I got you. Because, yeah, no, no. There have been times when I've seen bands play, and I believed I saw that happen.
Right.
Um, and I'm particularly interested in that experience because the solo artist, the painter or the writer, doesn't have opportunities for that, to have a relationship with someone, to be in a community, to be in a group, and to have someone feel you lift and can come under you and support that and augment that and acknowledge that and be there. That that is that's primo. That's
It's like a fire. It's like we're fanning this little, it's like a, like a little flame, and you're trying to keep it going, and then, you're trying to make it bigger, and then you want it to just like to get everyone in the room, and it's not 100% under everyone's control, but you're doing everything you
yeah,
can to
yeah,
like to keep it
yeah, yeah,
happening.
yeah, yeah. You really do, and it's so good. The for me, a lot of times it just feels absolutely ecstatic. And so the experience of it is so good that you do want to do whatever you can to give it more life, to sustain it, to enlarge it, to encourage, to say, yes,
Right.
let's do this. We can do this. Yes, all of it. And I don't know. I've not spoken with musicians after a performance when I thought I saw this happening, but I really do believe that I've seen it. I've heard musicians talk about it exactly the way you did, where it doesn't necessarily impact everyone in the band, but there are times when these two will begin to um, yeah, that has to be very special.
Yeah. I suspect, although I don't know for sure, that this is something that someone like the Grateful Dead tried to go after quite a
Okay,
bit.
okay, okay.
Yeah, and certainly, you know,
Mm,
Coltrane, you
mhm,
know,
mhm. Yeah.
the I thought of something else, and I'm gonna see how I can bring this around. And I remember you telling me a story, I think at Brenda's, and although I'm not sure about my recall. So when I'm teaching yoga and I'm not getting that lift, I'm not feeling the lift of the room,
Mhm.
I, I find myself, a lot of the places that I teach, or certainly more before our current situation, are large spaces.
Okay.
And I start like marching around in a circle while I'm teaching the class. And I find myself stamping around, and I'm telling the class, what the poses are. And sometimes there's music on, or sometimes I'm not. And I'm like, I'm churning this thing, and I'm turning it. And I think a lot of times I'm going right to left and right to left. And I keep doing that. And I get myself to like where I'm in that state, and then it lives.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And did you tell me a story about tribes in Africa when a tribe member has a problem? that the tribe gets together to dance out that problem?
Oh, that is a story about an experience I had in the Kalahari.
All right.
I was in the Kalahari, I was camping, and I heard rhythm. So I was really clear it wasn't, it, wasn't animals, but there was rhythm happening. And, always prepared for a party. I said, "Let me find the source of this rhythm." So I put my little miner's light headlamp on and shoes and whatnot, and just kind of walked to it. And the indigenous people of the Kalahari are called the San people. Alternate, they're also called the San Bushmen. They're an ancient culture in the Kalahari. The most unbelievable people. And I spent um, some time down there because I couldn't believe my luck. And so I just kind of hung out and stayed for a while. But this was my first contact with them. And they'd formed a circle. Um, they continued, they were still wearing traditional dress. Now, this was probably, oof, it might be going on 20 years ago now. But they formed a circle and they were involved in a ritual and they were dancing and they were doing this same counterclockwise rotation. Women on the ground rattling. And when I walked up, no one seemed to notice. So, they were deeply involved in this ritual dance, in trance. And I was fortunate in that there was a guy there who loved interacting with foreigners and spoke English. And he explained to me what was going on. And there had been a crisis in the community, um, a significant crisis in the community. And ritual dance was how they worked through the trauma, how they processed the trauma, and they processed it for the entire community, that the trauma was a trauma for the community, not just the family. And they danced this kind of clockwise motion, and they stomped the earth with their bare feet.
Right.
They pound the earth in this rhythmic, very intense motion. And they were singing songs. And at one point, one of the men in the circle of dancers moved differently. And I'm thinking I'm outside the ritual, but I'd been captured by it. And all of a sudden, this man's body, he became a bird. I knew he was still him, whoever him was, but I also knew who he really was this incredibly beautiful, elegant bird.
Wow.
Who began to dance a, a different dance that was his dance. And this ritual went on for hours. Um, and the healing was the medicine of this particular bird, the medicine of this particular man, the medicine of the earth, because they were pounding the medicine and uh, uh, requiring the earth to bring up its medicine through them with that pounding. And they pounded the earth in the same way. It looked exactly like the motion of when they pound cassava or something. It's very intentional and requiring the earth to bring the medicine up to heal. Um, and at one point, they turned to me. I hope I'm not going on and on with this story, but
No, I want to hear it, please.
at
It's
one
totally awesome.
they turned to my translator, I'll call him, and they were speaking, and he turned to me, and he said, "They want you to move into the circle
Ah,
because they say that you responded, that you heard, because you shouldn't have been able to hear, but that you heard the rattle because you were being invited by the earth to come into the circle, that you need the healing that is happening this evening." And he said, "But the question is, what did you see? Did you see something that was peculiar?"
oh,
And I told him that I'd seen the bird. He said, "Well, now you have to go into the circle." And the rhythm, the power of the rhythm, the intensity of it, um, required that I just submit to it. This is such this language that doesn't, it's not very tangible language. It's not, but it required that I slip into the stream, the energetic stream of the ritual. And slipping into it meant um, leaving my own groundedness, leaving my own form, being willing to let my form to arise from my form, to lift and flow from my form, to be in the power of this ritual. And the rhythm, my experience was is that it was the all the various forms of rhythm, from the rattles to the pounding of the earth, that was the transformative element for me.
wow.
Um, Releasing to the rhythm did it. Um, and again, it was, the question was, did I see the bird? And the bird was, he was just so obvious. And he approached me, and and the work went on for hours. Um, and it was just staying in the stream. There would be times when I would come up, my consciousness would rise up, and then it would just be allowing it would just dip back under, and I would be back in the stream.
Right.
And this went on, this in and out, this dipping in and out, went on for quite a while. And of course, when it was done, I was exhausted. Um, and and they'd have a feast because it had been so exhausting that they would renourish themselves. They would nourish themselves. But that was their gift to me, that they knew I'd never been through that healing ritual, that coming from the West, and they didn't think of it as coming from the West, but they understood that I'd had my own traumas that had never been submitted to ritual and to the earth, and that I was in need, and that I showed up because I was in need, and that generosity of that community was there to serve me, to heal me of my own traumas, just as they were healing their own community. It was quite generous, to say the least. It was transformative, it was generous, and it felt a part of all of what we're talking about. It wasn't an experience that was separate from any of this that we're talking about. And I knew that it was a piece of my own journey around the mystical and the transcendent.
Yeah. What a beautiful accident.
I know, huh? I
Yeah.
know, I know, I know. It that entire time I spent in Southern Africa was, I had dreams that were magnificent, and I can't even begin to tell you. You
Yeah.
know, it's yeah, it was incredible. It was just incredible.
So
Yeah.
that circle, this circle thing. So, and I'm only like coming to it like right in this moment right now. I'm having this moment where I'm like connecting the dots on things because I was doing this circling thing, trying to get my class, and then the dance you said with the it was a circle thing,
Mhm.
and there was this heavy metal band called Slayer that played at the Palladium in the late 80s. There was actually a riot that ended with like helicopters and LAPD like smashing people's heads with batons and all. But inside was what was referred to, which came out of the 70s punk rock community and evolved into from slam dancing into these things called mosh pits,
Yeah.
which were circular, and the people would be running around and banging into each other, this cathartic, like aggressive kind of letting go of our
Yeah.
anger. And that was so weird that those would be connected because they're
Yeah.
seemingly so far apart
Yeah.
from each other.
But they value the ritual that incites release.
Right.
That's the thing about punk rock. When I think, and this is a little risky for me to say, but when I think about punk rock and jazz, improvisational jazz, one of the things that they have in common, in my experience, is the valuing of of a path to being free, to freeing up, to letting go, and that freeing and letting go is the music is a vehicle, that the but the freeing is what the getting there to that place is what they have in common, and the willingness to allow extravagance to get them there.
Right.
And I've, you know, and I remember once I was with a girlfriend at a concert, and I was talking to a guy. A guy came up and we were talking. He says, "Yes, he said punk rock." And I thought about it. And it was like, yeah, I agree. I agree with that. It's a musical form that we don't think of as classical, the way we think of jazz. But I've seen enough punk rock scenes that it's not um, it's not designed to just be chaos and anarchy. It may look that way, but the concerts that I've seen serve a purpose of allowing people to experience that lift off, that lift.
Yeah.
And it can look real crazy, it because it's so physical,
Yeah.
whereas music um, often doesn't have the physicality. Um, but punk rock, a lot of yeah, it can have a very physical component to it. And so it can be hard for people um, to understand something, the energetic piece, the spiritual piece, the mystical piece, the mystery that's happening underneath the physical.
Yeah, I think one of the beautiful things about that is the not understanding it.
Well, yes, yes, yes. Knowing that, because that circle, the 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 circle is, for me, is at the heart. It's like the physical representation of this mystery, that it embodies one of the truths, which is that there is no separateness.
Right.
You know, the circle gives that to us, and it gives that to us when it's physical. It gives that to us in community, and when community is in circle, that energy moves in a way that we know that separation is the illusion, and that in this place, that energy circulates among us, that experience can circulate, and that we as a community can hold that for whoever lifts.
Wow. Does that connect to the old imagery of either the snake or the salamander eating its own tail?
You know, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I think the circle as a transformative form is ancient.
Right.
Um, you know, in old African American culture, and I'm pretty sure it predates African American culture. Um, there's something called the ring shout. And again, you're talking about circular, powerful um, motion and energy that's designed to be transformative.
Yeah.
So it's old. It's old. The power of the circle and being physical, not just sitting in a circle, but moving in that circle.
Yeah.
That circle itself being in motion is ancient, and that's what I saw when I in this moment in the Kalahari.
Right.
One of the things I saw. Yeah.
Beautiful.
What do you think? I'm so curious about what you think too.
All right. Well, I was thinking about, I was, one of the times I was in India, I was studying meditation and philosophy with this Brahmin priest that I accidentally found. He had
Yeah.
a sign on his house that said meditation, and I walked in and there was this old guy, like the guy that I expected to find, that I didn't, like a lot of Indian men just look like a businessman, even the yoga teachers and stuff. This guy had the big white beard and everything, and he was wearing like kind of the Brahmin outfit, the robe, and the string. Even though uh, my Indian yoga teacher wore the string, but he still had the mustache and the haircut of the businessman or whatever. Um, and I asked him if he would teach me meditation, you know, and I had studied meditation through books and for decades and decades. And he said he would teach me transcendental meditation, which is, he said his teacher had taught. But regardless, I was his only Western student, his only white student. And he invited me to a ceremony, and we were eating, and I was concerned about eating because I had already just gotten sick and I was on antibiotics because of the water there. And the food was given to us on like a big leaf, you know, and then so you would wipe the leaf down with water, which was my concern because the water there, and I didn't know where it came from. So my head state was in a different place. And then I think it was after we did what was called a fire ceremony. And you know, he was oftentimes very serious, and then sometimes he seemed like distracted when I was studying with him, because I would go to him every day and he would talk to me for hours, and he would say, "What did I just say?" And you know, I'd be like, well, it was just so like I felt like a person standing in front of an open fire hydrant. Like I couldn't even grab, like trying to grasp it and get a hold of all this information. I couldn't get it. But in this moment, he goes, "Okay, we're all going to get up," and he looks to me because he knows that I'm alone. I'm the visitor, and all of his kind of followers, which were all male, were there. And he says, and he looks at me. He goes, "We're going to go in a circle." And there's a fire in the middle of his house. There's a fire on the floor, and I look at him, and he makes this like childlike kind of look, and he says, "Like the merry-go-round." And we all marched around the circle, and then until the fire went out, and that doesn't answer your question as to what the circle does for us. I don't know. The earth is spinning
Yeah.
around,
Mhm.
and all the planets are spinning, and it's all this circular motion. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. I just know every culture throughout time has used the circle as a sacred symbol, and whenever I've seen ritual, the circle is at the core, and moving in that circle is at the core.
Right.
Um, yeah.
It made me, not knowing made me think of a question I have here.
Mhm.
Because I know that you're studying with people their mystic experiences and connection to the divine. And I've had not a lot, but a decent amount. And I don't know what other people have had or not had, so I don't know how to judge how much I've experienced that. But as I look back at those experiences, which one may be problematic because my memory of them is not the same as the feeling,
Mhm.
but I often think, am I experiencing things in a certain way because of my
Mm.
history as a human in this time?
Yeah.
Like, so being raised a Catholic,
Yeah.
when I have a mystical experience, even if I'm not practicing that, or if I've gotten rid of it, or if I don't believe in that supposedly anymore, it's, to me, my mystical experiences have often involved Jesus.
Mhm.
If I was a Hindu, would it have been Shiva?
Mhm. Mhm.
Because of not knowing, what I do know fills in the blanks.
Yeah. 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 That's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's kind of like when we have dreams, are are the images symbols, or do we look at them concretely? Are they metaphor? How do we understand them? And see, and I wasn't raised in any religious tradition.
Oh, wow.
And so um my experiences don't have a religious undertone. And what I've done is, in talking to people, I ask people to tell me about their experiences, what they learned from those experiences about themselves, about the nature of this illusion, about the nature of reality, of the spiritual dimension. Um, so, what do they know from their experience? And I ask them to separate that from what they believe
Okay.
that those experiences are telling them or pointing to. But just tell me what they experienced, and what they know, what the experience taught them. And the reason I did that was because I found um, that my beliefs have everything to do with the life I've lived and what I've heard that sounds reasonable, what I've experienced in this illusion that, has taken some space inside me. Um, and I'm so curious about the threads that run between us, about the truth of what this is all about. And I'm trying to figure out how to do that without it being colored by our experiences in this life.
Yeah, that's difficult.
It's not the easiest thing. Um, but if, for example, one of, that Jesus appeared in your experiences, that may not be as important as what you learned in that experience with him.
Right. So, and I'll tell you briefly, there was the first experience, I don't know that I learned anything.
Mm.
Um, the other experience, which I've told before, and if you care for me to go into detail, I can, but I'll
Of
tell you, you want me to go into detail?
course, of course.
Okay.
That's the fun.
Yeah. So before I became a yoga teacher, I was in this kind of in-between job where I was building movie theaters in people's houses. So it was like construction, but it was construction, but you needed to kind of know certain things. And some days I was very tired. I also think of like that Morgan Freeman in some movie where he said, there's no one closer to God than a man who's done a hard day's work.
Mm.
But I was uh, I was really tired. I had done several hard days work in a row, probably. I was driving down through Laurel Canyon towards Hollywood. I turned left on Hollywood Boulevard. The street is, lined with those palm trees that run the length of that street. I had the sun was shining on me in some way, and like my memory says that the sun was shining from the front of my car, but I don't know if that would have been possible because I think it was later in the day. So it would have been shining from behind me, from the
Mm.
west, because I was going east. And but anyways, the sun the sun like kind of filled my car, and as it filled my car, the image of me having a passenger was in my mind or actually there. And the passenger was Jesus. And he was sitting in my car next to me, and we were driving down Hollywood Boulevard, which is kind of funny right now.
Yeah, yeah. You and Jesus going down Hollywood Boulevard. I love it.
and I, and then the light and the sun, and this figure or whatever didn't like say anything to me, but there was like this feeling of which, and I've had in different experiences, that everything's right
Mm.
and
Mhm.
everything is all right. And it was just like a comfortable experience. There
Yeah.
wasn't a great message beyond, well, I mean, that's a great message in itself. I mean,
That is, yeah, that's
yeah.
powerful. Yes, it is.
um, and
Yeah.
I don't want to diminish it, but I'm it it didn't change my mind a lot. It was a momentary thing, almost like everything was different. And it makes me think of something. Um, Everything was different, but at some point we come back to this center line, this returning of self. I
Mhm.
don't know if it's the ego, or if it's the early imprintations of our childhood and what we are told is what, how the world is. Um, but yeah, in that moment, it was the everything's okay moment. Everything's good. This is the way it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Yeah. I've had an experience, and one of the things that I learned was that um, catastrophe and that whole range of things on that catastrophe continuum uh, was challenged because what came was everything is okay. Everything is exactly as it should be. Nothing is out of order. It's all right. It's all good. And um, that that's been one of those things that's been really important for me. I mean, there are many things that I learned over the years. That one, because most of the time in this reality, in this dimension, everything feels really messed up.
Right.
Most things feel really messed up and out of order. And to have an experience that says, yeah, it may appear that way. However, it's really all right. Um, that when I've talked to people about it, people have all kinds of reactions to it. One is everything is not all right, Pat. You know, that was your experience. However, that's not the truth, right? Um, and so it's really always made it very clear to me that there's this duality, there's this paradox that happens between everything is really in perfect order and isn't this a mess simultaneously, you know? Because one, for me, everything is in perfect order, always felt as if I was inside the mind of consciousness itself, that inside the experience of consciousness, this is all perfect. It's all as it should be. Inside my individual experience of separateness, this is a mess.
Right.
So for me, that's a big thing to learn is
Yeah.
that, yeah.
But the mess and the trauma and the mind, so many times I believe that those things are forcing us closer to the divine state.
Mhm.
Because it seems to me like a lot of time people reach that moment, and I've reached that moment through the states of unrest, through exhaustion. People and exhaustion reach the moments of mystical experience through going through some kind of traumatic event, like are pushed to the point where they have to let go of the story that we've been taught by society, um, because everything's so damn much at that moment, and that we can finally see through and experience the mystical experience.
I think it works differently for different people. I think I was just talking to a friend the other day who said that his experiences came when he was under extraordinary pressure from the trauma that he was
Yeah.
going through.
I think that's, go ahead. That's what I
And
meant.
that's when I know that's, I mean, you guys are simpaticos on that. I mean, he was very clear that each time he's had a transformative experience, it was because he was flat on his back, that the worst was happening.
Right.
And his ability to cope, respond, rationalize, adjust, none of those strategies were of any use at all. That's how bad they were. And it is that moment when the spectacular arrived. Um, and I also think that um, it's possible for um, horror to arrive in a way that can also break us, and not break us open, but break us down. And that, and we see people who don't have the resources, internal or external, to be able to fall apart and put it together again. They simply fall apart.
Right.
Um, and so I think there are a lot of paths there. For me, it's never been in a moment of trauma. There's been a range. For example, my first experience, I was a really young kid, and I was at home. My mother was at work. I was at home with my grandmother. Um, and for some reason, we had an old O'Keefe and Merritt stove, and it has a broiler that's underneath the stove that you kind of pull out, and the door kind of lets down the same way an oven door would. And as a kid, I think I was pre-kindergarten, but I backed against this and just took a burned hunk out of my leg. And I, was in that, horror of this moment. And I went to my grandmother, and I'm standing behind her at her chair. And I just, for some reason, turned to look back at my leg, and I still have the scar of it. But I turned to look back at my leg, and it was completely healed.
Oh,
And the time from the burn to just walking and standing behind her. And so that was a moment as a kid in which it was incredible terror, the pain, the what has happened here, you know, you know, I'm alone with this thing that has happened to me. And then there have been other times, and that was my experience in, what I learned from that is um, there is a way in which the miraculous happens. When things happen that defy physics and gravity and biology, and there's that is something that is something that enters the human experience, is the miracle and the magic and the mystery of all of that. Um, there was another time, however, when I was simply reading a book, and all of a sudden the separation was no longer there between this dimension and the other.
wow.
And so it's happened in a variety of ways, each giving me different pieces of the puzzle,
Right.
different pieces of information that I didn't have previous to that. But there's been that range from trauma induced to um, being at a concert
Right.
and being gone, or being in the desert in the Kalahari and the bird comes for me. Really different times, but unlike yours, I've never had a feeling of volition. I've never had the practice or a spiritual practice that would allow me to invite the experience.
Yeah.
That I think is to be able to invite transcendence, um, to be able to cultivate that ability inside yourself that says, I'm in a space. This is, let's go. Let's see. That's wonderful. So I've had a range from trauma to not.
Yeah, and I had the book experience as well. And
Ah,
and the message was very similar. That message was slightly different. The message was you're in the right place.
ah,
Um, and yeah, I never thought about
mm,
what you said about facilitating the experience or creating the experience, because I don't.
And nurturing it, the ability to nurture,
Right.
that's so beautiful.
I only remember it missing, but it goes back so far. It's like tell me how you breathe,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes,
because
that's right. That's right. That's right. That's
it
right.
came at such a young time.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, over time we define it, which I'm often afraid to do. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I really, you know, I really believe that conversation about our mystical experiences, the reason I'm so passionate about it is not the voyeuristic aspect of it, but I believe that what we know from these experiences, what we know is critical to our evolution as a species. I believe they come and we individually grow because we have this relationship with these experiences. And I believe that they come to so many people, and we discount them, we minimize them, but I believe they are the key to our evolution. What we know is that our systems aren't doing that. We know that as hard as we try, that we continue to stay stuck.
Right.
And we know the truth that there is only love and that there is no separation, that the truth of that is vital for our evolution. And I believe that millions upon millions of people have these experiences and have so much to offer in terms of our being able to get to step out of the suffering, this human suffering, and to allow us to put, even though Jesus was in your passenger seat,
Right.
and that comes from having a religious background, perhaps that's Christian, maybe, maybe not. But it would seem to me that no matter who was in that passenger seat, what you know is that forgetting this illusion that everything really is as it should be.
Right.
And and stepping into that knowledge, into that promise, into that place of assurance that's an important piece of information that to allow us to walk this planet with authority.
Right.
And so I wouldn't dismiss it at all because it's Jesus. Who the energy in your passenger seat is the messenger, one of the messengers, one of the sacred. I mean, oh, to have Jesus show up going down Hollywood Boulevard, man.
Yeah. It was pretty cool. Pretty interesting.
And facing the light, driving into that warmth. Oh, how beautiful. It doesn't get more beautiful than that. So I really believe that we know a lot of things, that if in community and having these conversations has radical potential to transform this thing that we are in, to transform us and to transform how we're relating to this thing. Um, it is, I think, inherently anti-colonial. It is radical, it's revolutionary. It breaks the taboo. So many people who are not creative feel a real taboo against talking about these experiences because quite often these experiences tell them that they are divine, that they are sacred,
Right.
that they are no less,
Right.
that love is the only truth, and that consciousness, what I call my experience was of consciousness or God or spirit, that consciousness is nothing other than love. And that we have a relationship with it, that it is us, we are it, that it does not, you know, one of my most important experiences is one that's really difficult for a lot of reasons for people. But one of my experiences of consciousness was that because it is exclusively love and there is no separation in love, that it does not judge. There is no judgment in love.
Right.
The judgment is only in the separation. And because there is no judgment, there is no right and there is no wrong. But those again are aspects of separation. And I remember after I had this experience in which, this came up, it was like, whoa, what does that mean? Because clearly some stuff is real wrong. Some things need to be judged and require judgment and correction you know, and for a long time, I struggled with what does that mean when clearly there are two realities happening. But that experience is an important one. It was an important one for me to understand that I was inside the experience of consciousness.
Right.
That in source, in consciousness, that's how this is all experienced. We're coming from something else. And I think that in conversations like ours, we have an opportunity to have deeper conversations about then what does that mean about practice, about how do we understand spiritual practice? How do we think about it? How do we think about community? How do we raise children? How do we think of creativity? Um, how do we nurture? How do we nurture knowing that we are really fine, that everything is all right and will be? That this isn't what it seems, that this is an illusion, that this is a collective illusion that we somehow are all trapped in, but we're all in it. But the reality is something very different. How do we have conversations about how to live with this, how to create culture?
Yes.
How do we create a value system and a world view and a cosmology? How do we create a new cosmology? Because it seems to me people with mystical experiences are being asked to create a new cosmology that has the potential to navigate us into the next level of our evolution.
Yeah. I'm going to steer us a little bit towards the end of this conversation.
Okay.
I want to address, you said the collective illusion. And there was a moment when this whole COVID things first started. And as I was laying in bed and as I was about to fall asleep, there was something in me that said, if we all together, all of us, decide that this is not going to happen and that it's over, it will be over.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
right, right,
Yes.
right.
And that's what powers me forward in these conversations is a recognition that collective consciousness, that these conversations have the potential to connect us and to nurture a different consciousness that says, you know, and I'm struggling for the language. I'm at that place, right? I'm at that place where I'm struggling for the language, but we have the ability to create the world we want to have. And it's about collective consciousness. It's about the collective belief, because that's simply the way it is. I mean, for example, we know that the American dollar, we know that all of these currencies, that they work because we've decided collectively that they work.
Yes.
There's nothing about that green piece of paper that makes anything work. It's a piece of paper.
Right.
But because we've decided that it has value, it works.
Right.
We are in agreement on a massive level. And so what I'm imagining is agreement on a massive level about what is actually real, what is actually valuable, what is the truth that allows us to transcend our involvement in this machine that we're in, that I'm calling this machine that we're in, this monster that we're inside of, that just as we can decide the dollar is useful as in a transaction between us, that is the token in our transaction, our collective consciousness can make other agreements. And I think now is the time for us. It's clear to me that we're being asked to create new agreements.
Yeah. Right on.
And we have, humanity, we have the tools to do that. One of the agreements has been that we won't have these conversations, that those are limited to the gurus, that those are limited to religious, spiritual hierarchies. But people everywhere are having these experiences all the time.
Right.
And so, that's my investment in this, because ultimately it's about new agreements about who we are and our authority in this place.
Beautiful. Okay, Dr. Pat, where can we reach you? Is it drpat.com?
That's drpatgay.com, drpatgay.com. That's where I am.
I'm going to put that in the show notes so that everyone can. And were you at one point asking people to reach out to you and tell you their mystic stories?
Yep, I'm collecting them.
Good.
And not just to collect them, at some point, they're going to become a part of a multimedia installation.
Oh, beautiful.
In which we will be sharing and putting our stories into the world. And people can know that their stories are valuable and important, and that there's a community that has also had these experiences. And we are, we're all about creating a new set of agreements about what is real and what is valuable.
Beautiful. I'm going to do the sign out, but I'm going to keep you on so I can say goodbye to you separately after that. And thank you so much, by the way, for this conversation. Absolutely fabulous.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you.
On.
It's good seeing you.
Right on. And thank you to everyone that tuned in with us today. And please share with your friends, subscribe. Please check out Pat's website, which will be in the show notes and which she told you about earlier. And that is it. And I will talk to you all very soon. 1 second here.